I was 19 when this happened. At the time, I had just moved out of my parents' house and was living in a tiny studio apartment near campus. Money was tight, so I picked up shifts at a small coffee shop a few blocks away. The job wasn't glamorous, but the hours were flexible and it paid just enough for rent and groceries. After a few weeks, I started noticing one of the regulars, a man in his mid-32nd, who always ordered the same thing. A small black coffee, no sugar. He usually sat in the corner with a laptop, barely speaking to anyone. He never seemed threatening, just quiet. One day, after my shift ended, he stopped me outside and asked if I did side work. At first I didn't understand, but he explained he owned a couple of short-term rental apartments and sometimes needed someone to check in on them between guests, water the plants, make sure nothing was broken, that kind of thing. He offered $80 cash for each visit, which was way more than I usually made in a day at the cafe. I said yes. The first 2 times were fine. The apartments were nice, minimal, and empty. I'd water the plants, take a few photos with my phone as proof, then leave. The 3rd visit felt off. The place was on the 6th floor of a newer building. Clean white walls, cheap modern furniture, that staged look you see on Airbnb listings. I was walking through the bedroom when I noticed a small Bluetooth speaker on the dresser. It caught my attention because it was angled toward the bed, which seemed strange. Most people put speakers on shelves or desks. When I got closer, I noticed a faint red glow behind the mesh. At first I thought it was just the charging light, but it didn't blink or fade, it stayed constant. Something about it made me uneasy. I leaned down and realized it wasn't a light at all. It was a lens, a tiny black circle, the size of a pinhead, pointing directly at the bed. My stomach dropped. I picked it up and it was heavier than a normal speaker, with a faint humming sound inside. That was when I realized it wasn't playing music, it was recording. Before I could process what to do, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. "Why are you touching that?" I froze. I hadn't told anyone I was here, not even my roommates. My heart started pounding. I looked around the room, suddenly aware of every corner, every shadow. Then I heard the soft creak of a door down the hall. Not the front door I had come through, but the closet. I stared at it, unable to breathe. The handle twitched, like someone had just let go. I bolted. I didn't even think. I dropped the speaker, grabbed my bag, and ran straight out of the apartment. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lock the door behind me. By the time I made it outside onto the street, I felt like I was going to throw up. My phone buzzed again. Another text. "You left in a hurry." I blocked the number immediately and went straight home. I never answered his messages again, never went back to that apartment, and I quit my cafe job soon after just in case he showed up again. For weeks, I couldn't sleep without checking every corner of my room for cameras. I covered the vents, unplugged every device, even taped over my laptop webcam. I never saw that man at the coffee shop again, but sometimes I still wonder if he was watching me in those apartments from the start, not just through that fake speaker, but from the closet that creaked open the night I finally realized I wasn't alone. I was 22 when this happened. At the time, I had just graduated college. I was between jobs and doing odd work around my small town, like babysitting, cleaning houses, running errands, basically anything that paid cash. A woman I dog sat for in the past recommended me to a friend of her neighbors, a man named Craig. He called me one afternoon and explained he'd be traveling for a week and needed someone to stay in his house to look after his golden retriever, Max. He said Max was an older dog, calm, and wouldn't need much more than feeding, walking, and some company. The money he offered was decent, and since I already had experience pet sitting, I said yes without hesitation. The house was only 15 minutes from mine, tucked away at the very end of a quiet cul-de-sac. When I pulled up that first evening, it was just before sunset. The neighborhood was silent. No kids playing outside, no people on their porches, just a row of dimly lit houses and tall hedges between them. Craig's place was a one-story ranch with pale blue siding and white shutters. On the surface, it looked perfectly ordinary. He greeted me at the door, smiling politely but with a stiffness in his posture, like someone not used to small talk. He showed me where the dog food was, explained the Wi-Fi password, and pointed out the guest room where I'd be staying. Then, almost as an afterthought, he gestured toward a hallway closet and said in a firmer tone, "That one stays closed. Just storage." I didn't think much of it at the time. Most homeowners had areas they didn't want guests snooping through. Once Craig left, I settled in. Max was friendly, immediately curling up beside me on the couch while I watched television. For the first night, everything felt fine, peaceful even. But around 3 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom. As I stepped back into the hallway, I noticed something strange. A small red light blinking faintly in the corner above the closet door. It looked like the reflection of an LED, the kind you'd see on electronics, but there wasn't a smoke detector there, or any device that I could see. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a router light bleeding through a vent. I went back to bed. The second night was different. While scrolling on my phone, I noticed Max staring fixedly at the dresser across from the bed. His ears perked, his eyes following something I couldn't see. When I got up to check, I saw a tiny black dot in the wooden frame like the pinhole of a camera lens. A cold wave went through me. I pressed my finger over it, and the glassy surface reflected the light from my phone screen. I was being watched. I barely slept, lying there stiff, too afraid to move. By the third night, I was paranoid. I started scanning every corner of the room. That's when I found another lens, this one inside the alarm clock on the nightstand. Its digital numbers glowed red, and tucked just above the display was a hole no bigger than a pencil tip. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my bag, shoved everything inside, and was about to leave, when I heard it. A sound from the hallway closet. A faint creak, like someone shifting their weight inside. Max started growling, low and guttural, his fur bristling. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Then came a whisper, muffled but unmistakable. "Don't go." I bolted. I didn't care about politeness or explanations. I ran straight out the front door, Max at my heels, and didn't stop until I was back in my car with the doors locked. I called the police from the gas station down the road. 2 officers met me there, and I explained everything: the hidden cameras, the red light, the noises from the closet. They followed me back to the house. When they pried open the closet, what they found made my stomach turn. Inside was a small folding chair, a tangle of wires connected to a monitor, and a camera feed paused on my bedroom. Next to it sat a pair of headphones, a half-eaten sandwich, and a pile of blankets shoved in the corner. Someone had been living in there, watching me. They never found Craig. His phone was disconnected, his car gone, his belongings mostly cleared out. It was like he vanished overnight. The footage and equipment were seized, but the police told me it was likely I wasn't the first person he had recorded. I don't pet sit anymore, and to this day, I tape over every camera on every device I own, because once you realize how easy it is to be watched without knowing, you can't ever shake that feeling again. My name is Alex, and this happened last month. I had just moved into a small rental house outside the city. It wasn't much: 1 story, 2 bedrooms, and an old backyard shed, but it was affordable and close to where I worked. The landlord, an older woman, told me her son used to live there before moving overseas, so the place still had some of his furniture and decorations. At the time, I thought it was kind of convenient. Less stuff for me to buy. For the first week, everything felt normal. The house was quiet, and the neighborhood seemed safe enough. I spent most nights on the couch watching television, just trying to settle into the new routine, but little things started bothering me. The smoke detector in the living room always had a faint red light blinking. It seemed oddly bright compared to others I'd seen. Another night, I noticed the mirror in the guest bedroom was tilted forward, like it hadn't been hung correctly. I brushed it all off, thinking it was just an old house with quirks. One Friday night, I was lying in bed scrolling on my phone when I heard a faint buzzing noise, like static. I looked around, but couldn't place it. I got up, checked the outlets, and then my eyes went to the vent above my bed. There was a tiny black lens tucked between the slats. My stomach dropped. It was a camera, pointed straight at my bed. I climbed up, pulled it out, and saw the blinking light. It wasn't just recording, it could transmit wirelessly. I tore apart the house. In the alarm clock, behind a vent cover, even inside a lamp, cameras, all pointed toward me. I felt sick. My first thought was the landlord, or maybe her son. I stuffed the cameras in a drawer and left for the night, crashing at a friend's place. But when I came back the next morning, the drawer was open. The cameras were gone. Someone had been inside. I called the landlord. She swore she hadn't entered. When I mentioned the cameras, she acted shocked, insisted I must be mistaken, and said her son wouldn't do something like that. I didn't believe her. That night, I stayed at my friend's again. Around midnight, I checked my phone and saw a strange Wi-Fi network pop up. Just numbers. I searched it online. It matched the exact model of the wireless cameras I'd found. The network was strongest near my rental house. Whoever set up those cameras was still there. I haven't been back since. I contacted the police, but without the physical cameras, they said there wasn't much they could do. I'm trying to break my lease, but my belongings are still inside. The worst part? Some nights, I get notifications that my phone is trying to connect to that same Wi-Fi network, even though I'm miles away, which makes me wonder if they planted more than just cameras. Maybe something I carried out is still broadcasting, and if that's the case, someone might still be watching me.
This happened about 2 summers ago, and it still gives me chills whenever I think about it. I'll just say up front, I've always had a bad habit of exploring places I shouldn't. Abandoned houses, restricted woods, old factories. I was always curious. My 2 friends, Matt and Chris, were the same way. One evening, just before it got dark, we decided to cut through a huge piece of farmland outside of town. On Google Maps, it looked empty, like just woods and fields, so we figured nobody would even notice us. At first, it was just kind of fun. We climbed the fence, hiked through the tall grass, and even came across some old farming equipment. Rusted tractors, broken plows, nothing unusual. But the further we went, the more uneasy it started to feel. There were no cows, no chickens, no signs of an actual working farm, just silence. And horses, dozens of them, spread out across the property. Which was strange, because the barn and the house nearby looked completely abandoned. We were about to turn back when we noticed something behind the tree line. It looked like a garage, but the roof was caved in and vines had grown all over it. Curiosity got the better of us, so we pushed through the brush and went inside. What we found didn't make any sense. There were cars. Not just random cars, but expensive ones. Sports cars, luxury SUVs, all of them covered in dust. Some missing wheels or doors, like they'd been stripped for parts. I remember whispering to Matt, "Dude, someone's stealing cars." That's when we noticed an old camper sitting beside the garage. Its windows were taped up with black trash bags. Chris, being the bravest of us, tugged on the door until it creaked open. Inside, it was filthy, but somebody had been living there. There were food wrappers, blankets, and a stack of tires taking up half the space. The worst part? The air was thick with a foul smell, like rotten meat. We didn't stick around to find out why. We tried to laugh it off, telling ourselves it was just a squatter. But as we were making our way back, we heard something, the sound of a gate slamming shut. It echoed across the property. We froze. From the corner of my eye, I saw headlights bouncing down the dirt path toward the house. A van. Its engine cut off, and for a moment, everything was silent again. We ducked into the brush, trying not to breathe too loud. That's when Matt whispered, "Don't look, but someone's standing by the house." Of course, I looked. There was a man on the porch. Or at least, I think it was a man. His skin was pale white, like paper. And from where we were hiding, I swear he didn't have a face. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a smooth, blank head, tilted slightly like he knew we were watching. We didn't wait around. We bolted for the woods, crashing through branches, tripping over roots, not even caring about the noise anymore. Behind us, we heard the horses going wild, neighing and stomping like they were spooked by something. The whole run back, I felt like we were being chased. I don't know if it was footsteps or just my imagination, but it sounded like someone was keeping pace with us in the dark. We didn't stop until we hit the road and collapsed, gasping for air. None of us spoke on the way home. To this day, I can't explain what we saw. Maybe it was someone with a mask. Maybe it was something else. But I'll never forget that blank white face turning toward us in the dark. And I know for a fact, we'll never set foot on that property again. I went to a farm property in the outskirts of my town, and I swear to this day it was one of the dumbest and scariest things I've ever done. Here's some backstory so this will all make sense. Me and my friends, Evan and Tyler, had gotten into this weird habit of sneaking onto places we weren't supposed to be. Abandoned factories, old construction sites, stuff like that. We'd never had any real trouble before, so we thought we were invincible. One Friday night, we were bored out of our minds, and Evan brought up this massive property about 40 minutes away from us. He said it used to be farmland, but was now fenced off and supposedly patrolled. On Google Maps, it looked huge fields, broken down barns, even an old house way in the back. It was practically begging to be explored. We piled into Tyler's beat-up Honda and drove out there. The road that led up to it was already creepy. No streetlights, just this long stretch of dirt road that seemed to go on forever. Both sides of the road were lined with thick trees, and the only sign we saw was one of those metal ones that said, "Private property trespassers will be prosecuted." We parked just off the road near a cluster of trees, so no one driving by would see the car. As soon as we started walking, I got this sinking feeling. The air was dead quiet, not even crickets. We found a section of the fence that was broken down and slipped through. On the other side was this massive open field. In the distance, you could see the outline of a barn. That was our first stop. The barn looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The doors hung crooked, the wood was splintering, and there were rusted tools scattered inside. We were looking around when we all froze because we heard what sounded like footsteps on the hayloft above us. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. We whispered to each other, convinced maybe another trespasser was up there, or maybe an animal. But when Tyler shined his flashlight up, there was nothing. Just old hay bales and rotting wood. We laughed it off, but my nerves were already shot. Still, we pressed on toward the farmhouse we had seen in the back. It took us about 15 minutes to cross the field and get near the house. The closer we got, the more uneasy I felt. The windows were all blacked out, and one of the shutters banged in the wind. On the porch was a rocking chair that swayed slightly, even though there was no breeze. That's when headlights suddenly lit up behind us. A truck was slowly making its way down the dirt path leading right to the house. We all ducked behind a pile of old farm equipment. The truck pulled up and stopped just a few yards away. The engine cut off, and for a moment there was complete silence. Then the sound of a door creaking open. We peeked through the gaps in the equipment and saw a man step out. He was tall, wearing a baseball cap and holding something long in his hand. I'm almost positive it was a shotgun. He walked slowly toward the house, but then he stopped. His head turned slightly, like he was listening. Then he called out in this deep, angry voice, "I know you're out there." My heart dropped. Evan mouthed "run," and we all took off toward the fence line. Almost immediately we heard him yelling, followed by the sound of the truck door slamming. The headlights snapped on, blinding us as the engine roared to life. He started driving across the field directly toward us. The fence was maybe 100 yards away, but it felt like a mile. I could hear the tires tearing up the ground behind us the second we reached the fence. I dove through the broken section we had come in from. Evan and Tyler weren't far behind me. We sprinted toward the trees where the car was hidden. The truck skidded to a stop on the other side of the fence, and the man got out again. This time, I heard the terrifying click-clack of a gun being pumped. We didn't stop. We got to the car, piled in, and Tyler floored it out of there. I swear, even as we sped away down that dirt road, I could see the truck's headlights turning to follow us. We never went back. And to this day, I'm convinced if we had hesitated even for a second longer, we wouldn't have made it out of that farm alive.